Namaste, namaste, and good evening, everyone. So we will get started now. But before we get going on the 11th chapter, I thought we will quickly go through what we have heard so far. So the whole purpose of Bhagavad-Gita is to motivate and rejuvenate the human mind. So if you are feeling challenged or feeling inadequate to do something, to face up to a situation, or despondent, which was what Arjuna felt at the beginning before Krishna started the discourse in the first chapter. The first six chapters, including the Arjuna Vishada Yoga, Krishna summarizes the process of action through which you can get out of this. The action part of it, the Karma Yoga. So, in a nutshell, can be summarized as have faith in the self and engage in selfless action is basically what it is all about, the Karma Yoga. You need to have abiding faith in the power that is within you, which is nothing but the infinitude expressing through your body, mind, and intellect. And it is your body, mind, and intellect that can be shaped. So using your power, the physical apparatus that we are blessed with, and focusing on that self and having faith in that self, engage in selfless action. Selfless action, the details of which were also discussed in these chapters. Fundamentally, it can be thought of as, or it can be realized as, any action that is geared towards the satisfaction of the inner self and not your selfish interests. That is about satisfying your intellect, mind, or the physical pleasures of the body. Instead, if you are focused on the self, higher goals, in simple terms, you can call it as very higher goals that are geared towards sustainability, inclusiveness, and those kind of value systems. Then that is how you actually raise yourself from the doldrums that you are in to a higher state of purposeful living. For that, Krishna talked about initially in the second chapter about joys of the self, intrinsic motivations that should be driving you, and not the results of actions. So if you look at the details of how and what exactly do you mean by the joys of the inner self, it is all about your happiness that you derive when you engage in thoughts and actions that are always of quality, of utility to others, is precise and accurate in doing what you are doing. Those should be the intrinsic motivations and not the results that accrue out of your actions. In the third chapter, Krishna talked about the attitudes that you must bring into these selfless actions. These attitudes are geared towards coexistence and expansion, and were termed as yajna, tyaga, samarpana, and prasada bhavas. The attitude of cooperation, attitude of sacrifice, attitude of dedication, and the attitude of, or a mindset of abundance. Accept and move forward. And in the fourth chapter, further elaboration of aptitudes were brought about, the aptitudes that are geared or rooted in the dharma of human beings. The dharma of human beings is to apply the power of thinking in actions. So this power of thinking gives rise to creativity, productivity, enrichment, and also the skill set, physical skill sets. People were classified into four different categories based on their capacity to think and act creatively, productively, enriching society, and about the dexterity that you can bring forth in your actions, physical actions. So Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras were those categories, later enunciated in different other scriptures. The Bhagavad-Gita initially In this chapter, fourth chapter does not name them. It just says that there are 4 categories. They are defined by the functional characteristics based on what you do, karma, and your aptitude that enables you to do that. So, guna karma vibhagashaha. 4 types of people are created. These 4 categories or 4 capacities to think and act in this world is something that is inherent in every one of us. So all of us have these aptitudes and aptitudes can be brought about. And it is about how you integrate this in different vocations in your life, in different situations, in different stages of your life, in different stages of your career, etc. That really define your success. When you apply these aptitudes with these attitudes and with the motivations that are not geared towards selfishness, then you actually get in rapport with the self, and all your outputs will be selfless. Thus, in the 5th chapter, the power of discrimination and power of dispassion, or thought power and willpower, how they combine together to create a person of a man of aptitude, fortitude, a person with fortitude, who is able to actually work in this world without likes and dislikes and engage in action completely focused on the joys of the self. Thus, we get into a state of mindfulness in action, which is the subject matter of the 6th chapter, Dhyana Yoga, where Krishna advises renouncing all union with the distractions. So that complete focus of the mind is the 5th, the final aspect of the karma yoga with which you must engage. We must all engage in action. And this is the outward aspect of the power of expressing through us. So the first 6 chapters talked about this outward aspects of how you engage in action, thinking and actions. The karma yoga pada, the karma yoga path. So it is, in a nutshell, you can talk about karma yoga as supreme motivations powered by the joys of the self, the attitudes powered by yajna tyaga samarpana prasada bhavas, aptitude of integration of creative, productive, enriching, and dexterous actions, and ultimately fortitude of mind, which can lead you to focus, a state of focus in all actions that you engage in. So that is karma yoga. And then the next aspect is, of course, we talked about the joys of the self. And if we were to really focus on the joys of the self and be motivated only by the joys of the self, we need to be, we need to have faith in the self. Without that, we will not be able to really focus on the joys of the self. Because most often we get distracted by our capacity to actually, think intellect, using the intellect capacity for our emotions and other pleasures of the body. So if you want to really take off your mind and then orient it towards the self, we need to be faithful to the self. We need to believe in the self. And for that, Krishna then embarked upon giving details of what the self is. How do you actually understand the self? So, in the 7th chapter, he talked about the universal nature of the self, about how the universe emerged from the infinitude and then manifested as Panchabhutas, controlled by universal forces of nature, which actually entered human minds and then started functioning as ego, intellect, and the mind. And then expressed the manifested functionalities in the universe as well as in the humankind. So he talked about the radiance of the sun and the moon, the sweet fragrance of the earth, sapidity of water, heat in the fire, life in every one of us, and the thinking capabilities, potency in human beings, austerity, the power of austerity in us, intelligence of the intelligence, brilliance of the brilliant, strength of the strong, devoid of lust and selfishness, and desires that are rooted completely in righteousness. Desires rooted in righteousness. So these are the powers with which this self expresses through us. And it is universal. Every one of us have the same thing. And if we want to express brilliancy, the power of brilliancy expresses through everyone in a similar manner. It is only a question of us applying our mind to develop the thought power. So, 7th chapter talked about the universal nature. And then Krishna went on to talk about the imperishable nature of the infinite, imperishable, sustainable characteristics of the power of self. So we all know that the universal self manifested at the universe, and it expresses through each one of us as, creativity, creative powers, motivations, attitudes, strategic powers and skill sets, willpower, dispassion, and discrimination, which we have seen in the Karma Yoga aspect, that they were enumerated as qualities that we need to bring about in our work. So creativity, productivity, and enrichment are the three powers that express through us. And, that manifests in the outward world as actions, creation, sustenance, and annihilation. Creativity, the creative capabilities are enjoined with the power of knowledge. The power to maintain and produce is enjoined with the inner capabilities within us, the development of inner capabilities within us, the wealth of our capabilities, and the power to annihilate evil. That power to annihilate evil is a result of the value systems that emerge from within us. So these are the Trimurtis that are present within us with their consorts. Brahma with Saraswati, Mahavishnu with Lakshmi Devi, and Mahadeva with Parvati Devi. And when we are able to invoke these Trimurtis from within us in the appropriate manner, through our own self-effort, ignited by the self-effort, if we are able to come up with these powers from within us, then that is the path to glory. Controlling the gunas, so that we can lead a sustainable existence powered by inclusive wisdom and enriching happiness. All this is capable through this self-expressing through our power of thinking, the power of not just thinking, but articulating it, in converting the thoughts into something physical. How do you do that? Thoughts are soft. And articulation, the process of articulation is a soft process that translates the thinking into physical action plans in the outside world. The power of expression, ultimately. So thinking, articulation, and expression are the three modes of transformation of the power of self. This modes of transformation of the power of the self is represented by the symbol of Sanatana Dharma, which is the symbol of our Hindu religion also. Om, A, U, and Ma. This is the power of thought, the power of articulation, A, U, and Ma, power of expression. Symbolized by that one symbol of three syllables, A, U, and Ma. So the processes to achieve this is basically what Karma Yoga described to us, of supreme motivations, right attitudes, proper aptitudes, and renunciation, fortitude, etc., and the ultimate state of flow or focused action in the outside world. So that is how the infinite self is expressing through us in the actions through Karma Yoga, which we discussed earlier. So here, Krishna is integrating, knitting together your knowledge about the self as universal, imperishable, and infinite. Now the imperishability was brought about, and the next stage is, of course, the infinitude. The 9th chapter talked about the infinitude of the self. And the 9th chapter, we can be summarized with these three messages, which is actually uh, given through these four slogas. One fourth sloga, which is about the description or definition of the self as the infinite. Self is infinite. Our self is infinite. Each one of us is infinite. That means there is only one infinitude, and all of us are the same infinitude. And that infinitude is happen chance enlivening our body, each individual bodies, and exhibiting the characteristics of our mind, thoughts, articulated into expressions. Everyone, every physical body is actually reflecting the power of that infinite self in different ways because of the characteristics of the body, mind, and the intellect. Different characteristics of the body, mind, and intellect. But if each one of these body, minds, and intellects had faith in that self, which is powering itself, that self will definitely help to develop new capabilities as well as enhance existing capabilities within this BMI. Yoga and Chema. Ananyas Chindayanto Mam Ejanaha Pachupasate Tesham Nityabhiyuktanam Yoga Kshemam Vahamiyam. We also discussed this sloga as the central sloga of the whole of Bhagavad-Gita, the locket of the necklace of Bhagavad-Gita, placed centrally in the scripture. And this faith in the self, that helps us to develop new capabilities as well as to maintain and enhance existing capabilities, is made possible through a process, the process of focus, devotion, selflessness, and ultimately humility in every one of us, each one of us minds. That is what the essence of the whole of Bhagavad Gita is. So, self is infinite, it enlivens our body, mind, and intellect, and makes us, do various things depending on the mind's differences. But if we have faith in that self, every one of us will be able to develop capabilities that are in tune with infinitude and also create new capabilities to reach that state with focus, devotion, selflessness, and humility. So that is the essence of the 9th chapter, which talks about the infinitude and how the infinitude can be tapped. So we are universal, which means that we are part of that universe. My identity is the universe itself. In fact, if you close your eyes and think about the universe as you and this body as the center, you get that strange feeling of infinitude. And it also, that self is imperishable. It was there even before you are born, and even after your death, it will be there. You are simply emerging within it and then merging within it. Emerging as a physical entity with a limited BMI, and when the BMI just disintegrates, yourself actually becomes the infinitude that it always was. So that infinitude, if we can actually think about this infinitude, universality, and its imperishability constantly in every actions that you can think of, we have also seen how we can implement this in physical plane in our day-to-day living with examples of workplace, mostly workplace examples, etc. We have seen that in all these chapters. We will continue to see that as we progress further with the rest of the chapters. That is how you actually get in tune with the self. So how does this infinitude, how is this implemented within this physical body? The nature itself, the universe itself has implemented that. And as a process for actually tapping this power, raised awareness, focused attention, deliberate practice, and accepting an accountability for it. If we can do this consistently and persistently, then that is going to make changes in your brain, which is tapping this power and giving you the identity of this limited BMI. And we call ourselves I, me, mine, etc. Because we think we are the limited and we forget the self, infinitude. And Gita is directing us back to the origin, the infinitude, so that the BMI becomes just an instrument in the hands of the self. How can you do that? You should always raise your awareness to that thought. Whenever you feel let down, whenever you feel melancholy, whenever you feel despondent, think about the infinitude that you really are. Keep constantly raise your awareness toward the infinitude. Focus your attention on what actually is going wrong and what you want to make, what changes you want to make, and set higher goals. Connect to it. Deliberately practice this every day. Deliberately practice this. Don't succumb to the weaknesses. Constantly practice this. And even as a practice, you can even you set accountability by answering your answerability by inner self. The self is always watching you. You cannot cheat that self. Minor accountabilities can be set, but the higher accountability would be that fact that your self is always witnessing what your thoughts are. So this process, basically what it does is it is helping you in the process of yoga and ksema, which is about, physically in the brain. It is about, myelination and creating new connections within your brain and myelinating it. And also the process of, expanding your brain through neurogenesis yoga. So this is how we tap the universe. We tap the imperishable universe, the infinitude, and bring it into our brain so that our minds now start focusing on that. And then in the 10th chapter, Krishna talked about how this self, when it empowers the mind, how it is really enhancing the 4 different personalities within us, the emotional, rational personalities, and the memories, and all, and the ego. And the various capabilities are developed in the brain. And ultimately, it all expresses as the 7 cognitive functions. As it is these 7 cognitive functions and the 4 human personalities were described as the great 7 rishis and the 4 ancient manus. I mean, right from the beginning of human race. That is why it's a 4 ancient manu. It was these 4 personalities were there in the human beings, and through rigorous practices, we developed the mind. The 7 rishis, the rishi functions came about. And those are nothing but the cognitive functions that we have. And that is the reason why, you can see everywhere it matches with the descriptions that Krishna gives. The world was created by these rishis. These cognitive functions, only the world, the physical world of our interaction, transactions were created because of this. And the excellences that we see all around has been created through this process. The excellences we are not talking about selfish excellences, but we are talking about the excellences that brought about complete change in the way human beings lived, as well as in the way human beings evolved to understand its own inner self. So those examples were given out as vibhutis, manifestations of brilliance of the self. If the manifestations of the brilliance of the self that we see all around is possible, then it is possible for me also. That is the faith, that is the confidence that we need to build. And in fact, Krishna wanted Arjuna to believe in himself. And therefore, he pointed out excellent examples in all around the world. At that time, it was like a practical demonstration of the powers of the self. That was done in the 10th chapter. So with this, after having seen around the manifestations of the spark of brilliance that the self, the power of the self can invoke within each of our minds, Krishna wanted to consolidate the whole vision through the Vishwarupa Darshana in the 11th chapter. So that is the subject matter of today's discussion. The universal infinite, the grand vision of this universal infinite. Okay, we have seen these sparks of brilliance everywhere, bits and pieces. Now, what does it all mean? So how do you actually see all this and create a higher dimensional vision within yourself. In fact, one of the mantras that we always chant, Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. That sloga itself captures this grand vision. That is absolute. This is absolute. Absolute arises out of the absolute. If absolute is taken away from the absolute, absolute remains. It's talking about the infinite nature of our own self. You cannot, from infinitude, if you take out infinitude, still the infinitude remains. This is the grand vision. It is very beautifully captured in a phrase, a quote-like statement, which says, when world is present, Brahman exists. That is what we think. But when the world is not, then Brahman alone exists. This is the Upanishad essence of the whole thing. This is what we should always constantly think about, which should give us the confidence of infinitude. And that is the purpose of Bhagavad-Gita. That is the purpose of Gita intelligence. This extraordinary vision that enables us to see the unbelievable, the amazing, the extraordinary infinitude, the vicissitudinous, the dichotomous, you can see the good, the bad, everything. The unexpected, the expected, everything in general. The infinite of the self is termed as divine vision. This is what is called as divine vision. Okay. Now we are going to see what Krishna told Arjuna in these verses. So Arjuna, he actually was convinced about this self and the powers of the self and the infinitude, etc. After having heard all about universality, imperishability, and infinitude, and as well as the different manifestations illustrated by Sri Krishna through 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th chapters. Definitely, he feels that, yes, we will be able to surely focus on the self and be free from delusion. But again, maybe for the purpose of all of us to actually again get a view, a summary of it, having heard the glories of the self in detail, Arjuna again wanted Krishna to summarize this holistic and multidimensional perspectives. So the first 3 chapters are Arjuna's questioning of, or Arjuna's conversation with Krishna, asking him to describe this. It is seeing through the hope and despair of the subjective world. Subjective world has got its own limitations, which we see outside, the objective and the subjective world outside of material aspects, physical things. It comes and goes. Of hope and despair. It is about hope and despair. The mind that is devoted to self can behold the multitude of forms and names, because that infinitude, if you are convinced about the infinitude, all the things that comes and exists within this infinitude can be understood, thought about, and understood as divine glories, as the glories of that infinitude expressing through the physical medium. If you focus your mind's eye, you will be able to actually see this and differentiate the infinite self in the macrocosm, as well as in the moving and unmoving things, in all these moving and unmoving, each of those microcosms. And whatever you desire to see, you should be able to see that. And that vision is called as the subtle intellect. The powers of the subtle intellect is what provides you with that vision. The emotional mind and the rational mind may fail to see this. But the subtle intellect will be able to see these glories of the self. The development of the subtle intellect is basically what Krishna is initially talking about. That subtle intellect is the spark of the self within us. The spark of the self within us, helping the mind to actually look at itself and in relation to the infinite. And this is the glorious manifestation of the lordly yoga, the divine yoga. If we can kindle this subtle intellect by all these processes that we have discussed previously through all the 10 chapters or the 9 chapters initially and illustrated in the 10th chapter, the glorious manifestations, you will see it all around you. And that actually provides you with the multiple perspectives, abundant mindset, a positive attitude and a confident attitude, and also the intellectual perspective of unity in diversity. You see multiple things, but you are convinced that all of this is nothing but that infinite expressing itself in various forms, including you. That is the holistic perspective that need to be developed. Cloaked in different roles, protected by the fragrance of health and all the wonders. Endless divinity is everywhere. In fact, Sanjaya is actually describing this scenario to Dhritarashtra. And he says that in this, what Arjuna saw was the splendor of the self. The splendor was so bright that it was equivalent to, 1,000 suns shining in union. If the splendor of 1,000 suns were to shine forth simultaneously in the sky, the universal splendor of the self could be likened to that. The 12th verse of this chapter describes this. And that chapter is basically what, even Albert Einstein, Oppenheimer, and, during the wielding of when the atom bomb was released, he was talking about that splendor, And that kind of a splendor is basically what Arjuna actually saw on the battlefield on that day, as described by Sanjaya through Dhritarashtra. What is that? It is about that splendorous, bright light is the bright light of knowledge, the bright light of what you call the spark of the infinitude of the self, giving our mind the perspective, the multiple perspectives about the universality, imperishability, and the infinitude, and about the coexistence of both the good and the bad, etc. And also about your positive mindset, of abundant mindset that gives you the confidence to embark upon any activity. And also about the unity in diversity. So these three things are the lights that should spark within us. And if we actually are able to do that, then the bright light that will accrue to you is going to be splendorous, as splendorous as 1,000 suns. And then from then onwards, from 15th verse to 31st verse, about almost 16 or 17 verses, Krishna was actually describing, not Krishna, the Sanjaya was describing all this vision that Arjuna actually saw. We will summarize this in a few bullets, which will help us to actually understand what the Vishwarupa Darshana is. The picture was all encompassing in one place and at once, the same time. Everything is there, and the whole thing is the self, the infinite. And everything that you see around you, your experiences, your projections, and the things that you see all around you are nothing but projections on that infinitude. Universal. The universe is projected onto that infinite. First of all, the whole universe is something that is projected onto your infinite. It is also that we should also understand that we are within this infinitude. We are immersed in this infinitude. It is an immersive experience. We are part of it. It is multidimensional, not just limited in 3D space. It is about, multiple dimensions. It was a never seen before vision. All beings and all species in one shot. A comprehensive vision. It was a comprehensive vision that, That gives us it is all about your own conviction about the infinitude. In that, you see everything all together: heaven and hell, victory and defeat, life and death, creation and destruction. Everything you can see. Something that gets created and then it gets destructed. It actually dissolves into infinitude itself. So all these are just waves in the ocean. So this is the characteristics of the infinitude, or the glorious vision that Arjuna witnessed. And it is radiant. The vision has brilliance of thousands of suns. Divi Surya Sahasrasya. And countless, infinite are the things and beings in this universe. And infinite are their names and forms, not to speak of all the infinite qualities that each one of these physical entities exhibit. The cosmic form of the self has no beginning, no end, nor any middle, no first, no last. It is infinite. So the infinitude is now defined further in physical things, equating it to physical things, trying to make us understand what infinitude is and what each one of us is. Immeasurable. The finite cannot measure the infinite. And this is what Arjuna saw through that vision. That wonderful vision that is actually described in a few verses, we need to assimilate that in this form. It is a holistic vision. Everything in this universe was happening simultaneously, the good and the bad, the terrific, the serene, etc. The opposite kinds of behaviors clashing on each other, the high and the low, all existing in a comprehensive whole. So, in our life also, in every situation, within our workspaces, in our life as a whole, etc., you can see the good, the bad, everything happening. In fact, it will be a good practice to actually look around, look back, and then try to see every 5 years of your life or something like that. Just as kind of time samples you can take. Every 5 years, 20 to 25 years, 25 to 30 years, 30 to 35, and then start meditating on it and trying to find out what are the good and the bad things that happened in your life. And, take each one of the, if you're 50-year-old, maybe then you can actually take about, similar 15 or 18, such kind of time slots, and then see what is happening. Good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, and good, bad. And then look at the Gita intelligence and what Krishna says. Krishna talks about your supreme motivations, your attitudes and aptitudes, your abundant mindset, yatyaga, samarpana, prasada bhavas. And if you are actually employing these things in your life, it doesn't mean that always it will be good. It means that if you look back and take stock of your situation, you will see the good, the bad, the pleasant, and the unpleasant, the shocking, the not so shocking, and all those things in your life. But Krishna promises you that you will always go forward if these attitudes are brought forth in your thinking and the actions. That is what the essence of actually understanding Bhagavad-Gita is. You start to take stock of the situation, and then, in the balance of your life, you can see good, bad, etc. But overall, you will actually be making progress. And that is what the abundant mindset brings about. That abundant mindset is the reflection of that infinitude, and that infinitude will definitely see through it that yoga and Shema will be looked after by that self. That is the promise Krishna gives us. Ananyas Chintayando Mam, if you are able to do that, Ejanaha Paribhasate Tesham Nityabhiyuktanam. If such people who is focused, Yoga Kshemam Vahami Aham, the self. The self will definitely take care to see that the net effect is going to be positive, is going to be one of progress, is going to be one of elevation. Elevation from the low to the higher. And that low to the higher, you should see. This, if you are able to see this in your mind's eye, then that is the Vishwarupa Darshan. And this is exactly what Arjuna saw there. And that was described in its grand, what you call, scale. And that is for us all to assimilate and then apply in our life. The lessons. What is the lesson that we can learn from this? 32 to 34 verses described as that it is that no one is indispensable. No individual physical being is indispensable. Therefore, do your duty, but never succumb to inaction. That is why karma defined that. Karma yoga defined that. Do your work to the best of your ability and humility. What is bound to happen will happen. Forces of nature. Your role is to play the part well. That is what is ordained by the manifestation of the infinitude as the universe. When you have no worries of the results, if you are not carried away by your eye always on that result, you will be able to do your duties wholeheartedly. Your duties, the quality of the way in which you engage in your actions will start becoming better and better if your eye is not on the results. So with this, when this is actually understood by Arjuna, Arjuna then engages in a sort of prayer for that infinitude. From verse 36 to 44, 9 verses, Arjuna is actually engaging in a kind of prayer or salutations to the self. And the summary of the salutations to the self is this. He says that the power of the self, having understood the infinitude and of the self, he then actually as a salutation describes the self. The power of the self is the very basis of everything, sthane, and the universe is as it should be. The nature follows its laws, and beings, all these manifested things in this world also follow their nature. The ultimate energies show through all beings, especially we are talking about human beings here more, in the form of love, peace, stability, righteousness, and creative energies. So this is how the self will actually express itself in this universe, as love, peace, stability, righteousness, and creative energies. The self expresses through each one of us, but nature makes beings and things follow their patterns of actions because the mind is conditioned, and that conditioned mind actually takes it up and then does things according to its whims and fancies. The good follow the righteous path, and the evil their evil ways. So the power of the self actually is the cause-effect relationship itself, cause-effect relationship. Specific causes and specific effects are because of the mind. But the cause-effect relationship, that power of cause-effect relationship is what the self is. That is what you should understand. The power of the cause-effect relationship is what the self is. Self is eternal existence. Existence is thus infinite. That power that makes the physical world manifest and exist, that is the self. And within this universe, each one of us feel that we exist. And we, because the mind is conditioned, thinks that I am the limited individual. Actually, that I am, that is the feeling of existence. But that feeling of existence normally gets conditioned by the limited things, and then therefore I think I am this physical body. That is what is happening. Everything that manifests within this infinitude is the glorious manifestations of that infinite itself. The infinite pervades everything. The non-living, the living, everything. Righteousness, wealth, pleasure, freedom are fundamental goals of human beings. Dharma, artha, kama, moksha. So This power of the self, ultimately, when it is expressing through the mind, is truly manifested as righteousness, wealth, pleasures, and the freedom. So this is actually an invocation of Arjuna as a salutation to the self, further which is described by Sanjaya as that, Krishna wanted Arjuna, Arjuna wanted Krishna to actually limit this, Vishwarupa, and then come to practical terms and show him what exactly this world is. So then Krishna, it is illustrated as Krishna assumes the form, the four-handed form of Mahavishnu. That four-handed form of Mahavishnu signifies this omnipotence of the self, this powers of the self as infinitude expressing or manifesting in the universe. As dharma, artha, kama, and moksha, righteousness, wealth, security, and pleasure. The four arms are these four dharma, artha, kama, mokshas, and the instruments that these four arms carry, Shanga, Chakra, Gada, and Padma. The conch is actually the representing, it is representing that inner sound of conscience from within us. The conch sound, the sound of consciousness from within us. That is the one of the hands of that self, infinite self. So within us, it is there within us, the sound of consciousness. And then there is this wheel that is always protecting us. That is the time. In 10th chapter, Krishna has said that self is time. So it is this time, the Kala Chakra, that is that chakra. This chakra is basically what makes us go through all these experiences and gives us the, what you call as the wisdom and the foresight through experiences. So we need to actually learn from that. We need to make sure that we understand this law of time. Protects you. That will protect you. The wheel will thus protect you. And then there is this maze, the gada, which punishes if you go wrong. It is that power of what you call, the feelings that we get normally in terms of, when we do something bad. The conscience told you, it is wrong, but you still engaged in it. And then the guilt feelings and other things that come within you, which blows you. And that is the gada, which protects you. These are all inner powers, actually. You can see that these are all powers that the mind actually brings forth when the self empowers it. The gada and the padma, the lotus, is the power of knowledge that can blossom into wisdom. The various kinds of knowledge. And you can say that the essence of the Bhagavad-Gita itself, if you are able to understand it and then apply that in your life, it is the blossoming of the wisdom of the Bhagavad-Gita intelligence within us. That is the lotus. So the conch, wheel, maze, and the lotus are representations of how the power of the self-infinitude comes into within us and helps us to modify ourselves, so that we can engage in our actions of dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. Righteousness, creation of wealth and security, creation of pleasure, power, and fame for the right causes, and liberation and expansion, enrichment and expansion. Dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. 1147 to 1149 describes this. The sound of the BMI self-integration is the guiding force from within us. The wheel of time is a guide working through our experiences, the chakra. The powerful force of conscience is the checking influence on our transgressions, the gada, and the wisdom of higher level knowledge, which we will equate to Bhagavad-Gita, is the multidimensional blessing that guides us when we resort to the joys of the self. in all our thoughts and actions. So that Vishwarupa Darshana can be replaced by the Darshana of Mahavishnu with the four arms and the Shanga Chakra Gada and Padma. And that vision should actually invoke within us these powers so that we are able to tap into this infinitude to lead a life that will yield the Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha for us. Thereafter, Krishna actually talks about, okay, I will go to what Krishna said initially and then come back to this. Krishna says 52, 53, and 54. Krishna says, it is very hard to see the infinite form of the self. Even those who are possessed of productive powers yearn to see it. Even those people who are tapping these powers, yet they don't understand it. Neither by mere knowledge, nor by austerities, nor by charity, nor by making sacrifices, can you behold this infinite easily. But how can you actually do it? In one verse, he summarizes, by being devoted with and not distracted, you can envision, experience, and identify with the self by being totally devoted to the self. If you have to be totally devoted to the self, you should actually understand that it is universal, it is imperishable, and it is infinite. That in universality, imperishability, and the infinitude should be convincingly established in your mind. And then only, with focus, if you are able to do your duty, you will be able to realize it. And he is actually saying that the tapping of the power of the self is ultimately about living behind a legacy that is lasting and universal, imperishable, and infinite. So it is about how you tap these powers through your mind, and then you create a world of your influences that will leave behind a universal legacy, a global legacy, an imperishable legacy, and an infinite legacy. So looking at that, purpose is that gift that we all of us have. Human beings have what is called as a wonderful gift called purpose. We need to define our purpose, a gift that you bring to this world. So what is it that you bring that no one else has? That is the opportunity for you to create a legacy. In all of us, we are not talking about negative things here. We are talking about what can you do to make changes in this world? What is the small thing that you can do? Start small and then grow slowly. Even small things leave behind a lasting legacy. So think every day, in every action, in every 1 hour frame, actually you can do that. What is it that I can do now which will leave a more lasting legacy than immediate pleasures, immediate gains? So Krishna is talking about how we remember people about, maybe in a limited way, 5 to 10 years after they pass away. That is what is their purpose. So it becomes the legacy. Our purpose should always get deeper, richer, and fuller. Deeper legacies, richer legacies, and fuller legacies. The process of articulating our purpose is the process of life. And finding the courage to live it. A purpose and how it impacts the world. Purpose to impact is the single most important task that human beings can perform in this world. And apply the Gita intelligence to make a different world. A lasting legacy in the sands of time. So, leverage who you are. So, in practical terms, I'm now equating all these descriptions, allegorical descriptions into what is called as practical things that we can do in this world. Limited practical things which will actually start reflecting in a larger way later on. Leverage who you are. But understand that no one is indispensable. Use your talents and aptitudes and get into a flow in whatever you are doing. Every day, This is a everyday sadhana that you can perform. And for that, regularly review your personal productivity and keep enhancing it. Whatever your purpose is, whatever your goal is, the higher goal, make sure that you review every day whether you are progressing towards it. And keep enhancing it. Every day improve your Uddare Atmanatmanam. Every day keep improving your performance. Stop and recharge as required. It is not something that it is not that you can go on doing things without breaks. Taking break is not a crime. So stop and recharge if required. Do not be ashamed of borrowing from others. That is why, Krishna was talking about the vibhudis. He was giving examples. Look and learn from others. Look and learn from the outside world. If you find somebody doing something good, if you find somebody telling you to or teaching something, if you find somebody actually leading a life that you want to mimic, which is good, try to learn from them and then go forward. Life is not one-dimensional. Understand that. Develop a holistic vision. Failures are part and parcel of life. Lopsided growth and success can lead to failure later. Adopt behavior that do not interfere in the healthy productivity of life. Dukkha samyoga viyogam. Focus. What is right? Go forward and achieve whatever you can. Problems are part and parcel of life. You should have the foresight to envision this and have damage control plans. So you should always, prepare for the failures, problems, challenges, and, try to, if through experience you can develop this foresight to envision damage control plans. Procrastination busting habits need to be cultivated. Never keep postponing things. So you have to somehow break the procrastination habit. No one can remain productive always and be at very high energy levels continuously. That you should understand. That is the limitations of the physical things. Be able to succeed always is also not possible. And it is also not possible to be always happy. And in the same manner, it is also not always possible to be always unhappy either. That is the vision that you should have. You need to learn to accept both. This is the holistic vision. This is the Vishwarupa Darshana. You need to manage your work, life, leisure, pleasure by understanding your own productivity patterns and aptitudes and inclinations. So this is the comprehensive view that we should gain by understanding all this. And when you understand that, light dawns within your mind like 1,000 brilliant suns, which is what Arjuna actually had. And then finally, Krishna concludes that if you do actions dedicated to this infinite self and consider that self as the supreme and not your fickle mind, intellect, etc., and you free yourself from all likes and dislikes, carrying no enmity towards beings, you will attain the state of the self. That is a concluding sloga. So, this is actually the formula with which Krishna started the whole discourse. Chapter 2, 11. Nasate vidyate bhavo, na abhavo vidyate sadaha. There is no non-being of other. Non-being of the self or the unreal, the real, and there is no non-being of the real, and then there is no being of the unreal. Okay, that is the formula. What it says is that the self is infinite. Self is always victorious. Self is all powerful. So I can never lose this. I am the self, so I can never lose. That is the faith that you should have. Because I was never lost. I am infinitude. I am never lost. So I can never lose. In practical terms, this is basically the life of inspiration. The life of inspiration is the life of being powered by the self. The life of being powered by the self is the life of inspiration. And it is this inspiration that we are actually going to see in the next chapter. What is a technical, descriptive, elaboration of the concept of inspiration? That inspiration is your intense devotion for the self. Your intense devotion for the self is basically what inspiration is all about. And that is actually defined and elaborated in 20 verses in the next chapter, chapter 12, Bhakti Yoga. In fact, it is described in first 12 verses. And after from 13th onwards to 19th, 7 verses, Krishna describes the characteristics of such people who are inspired. Characteristics of such people who are inspired. He gives 32 examples. 32 characteristics, not examples, 32 characteristics of inspiration which he likes. That is, those are the characteristics of a bhakta. So, 12 verses of defining what inspiration is and the process towards it, and 7 verses of the characteristics of such people, and then concludes on with the 20th verse. It's a small chapter, but it contains tremendous amount of knowledge summarized in a nutshell. So we will actually be looking at that in the next week, 12th chapter, Bhakti Yoga. So for today, I think we will stop at this point with the concluding mantra, and then thereafter we can discuss